Before the Christmas tree, Santa Claus, gifts and shopping, there was Christmas. But what did it look like? And what did they believe about it? What was Christmas before the modern age? Hi, I'm Kevin McLean. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out the links below. Christmas, a time of giving, of family, of joy and presents. This is how many people now view Christmas, after the holiday was effectively hijacked by mass marketing and secularism. But before this, Christmas was something quite different. As is obvious from the name, Christmas is related to the birth of Christ. However, the date of this birth is not mentioned in the Bible, nor in any ancient Christian sources. Rather, it seems to have been set on the 25th of December, specifically to link it with the dating of the winter solstice on the old Julian calendar. By modern calculations, the solstice is often on the 22nd, but on the Julian calendar, it was set on the 25th. Now, one will sometimes hear the claim that the date was set to represent Christ rising from the dead, but this isn't quite accurate and confuses the symbolism of Christmas with the symbolism of Easter. However, it is clear that there was an intentional connection formed between Christ and the Son, and that this is almost certainly the basis for his birth on the 25th of December. Beginning with St. Patrick himself, we see Christ directly linked to the Son. In the Confessions, St. Patrick says, "The very same night Satan attacked me violently while I was sleeping, and there fell on top of me as it were a huge rock, and none of my members had any force. But from whence did it come to me, ignorant in the spirit, to call upon Helios? And meanwhile I saw the sun rising in the sky, and while I was crying out, Helios, Helios, with all my might, lo, the brilliance of that sun fell upon me, and straightway shook all the weight from me, and I believed that I was aided by Christ my Lord." Now, Helios is the Latin Vulgate form of the Hebrew Elijah, and this invocation appears to bring forth the sun, which then dispels Satan's hold upon Patrick with its light, and it seems unquestionably that he is equating the power of Christ with the sun. Yet Patrick is often cited as being an advocate against solar worship. Here is Patrick in his own words on the subject. "On that day of resurrection, we shall rise again in the brightness of the sun, that is, in the glory of Christ Jesus, our Redeemer. For the sun we see rises each day for us at his command. But it will never reign, neither will its splendor last, but all who worship it will come wretchedly to punishment. We, on the other hand, shall not die, who believe and worship the true Son, Christ, who will never die." And it's important here to point out that when he says true Son, he means the true Son, S-U-N, not S-O-N. So while trying to denounce worship of the sun on the one hand, he is promoting a transcendental solar worship on the other, differentiating Christ from the physical sun yet aligning him with it. The physical sun in Irish was viewed as feminine, and thus there is likewise ample associations between Mother Mary and the sun, and also Mother Mary and the dawn. But what link then, if any, does this have to pre-Christian worship or practice? It's clear from analysis of the role of kings and their poetic attributes that they were in pagan times linked in a significant way to the sun, some being said to wield the spear of the sun. They were prohibited from rising before the sun, and could only make oaths or contracts while the sun was risen. In typical formulations of oaths, the sun is that which is first invoked, and in the annals of Ulster, it specifically names a king who was killed by the sun for violating an oath. This reminds us of the significant place that solar symbology had in Bronze Age Europe, symbology which continued almost seamlessly in the case of Ireland. In Irish myth, there is a figure called Trefuilngid Trí Ochar, meaning the powerful upholder of three keys, sometimes shortened only to Trefuilngid. It was this Trefuilngid who appeared to Fintan mac Bohra, who in turn imparted all his knowledge of the laws and customs of Ireland. It says of this event that, "Tonight, a glorious spirit of prophecy has been set in the shape of a gentle youth, and has alighted on his lips from a ray of the sun, until it has extended through his head, so that there are 7 good speeches of poetry on his tongue to tell the histories." This figure is detailed explicitly in 2 sources, both of which associate him overtly with the Christian God. During a festival, the men of Ireland beheld a great youthful warrior, Oglech, approaching from the west. The sun shone from between his legs as it set, and he was arrayed in clothing of crystal, with sandals and great golden hair, carrying a branch that brought apples, acorns, and nuts. He said he was called the great upholder of the 3 keys because it is I who cause the rising of the sun and its setting. And particularly on that day he was concerned for the sun, for it had run away and hid itself due to the death of Christ. After this, Trefuilngid gives the statutes of Tara to Fintan. It is said they were never replaced, for they were given by Trefuilngid, who was either an angel of God or God himself, here meaning the Christian God. Given what Patrick says of Christ, namely that he causes the sun to rise every morning, the connection is clear, even between completely unrelated sources. More could be said, but the takeaway for this presentation is that the Irish Christian idea of God and Christ melds with a pre-Christian God associated with the sky and the solar pathway, and that these similar aspects allowed the rapid spread of Christianity. Cuchulainn, who is likewise linked to Christ, being said as early as Cormac's glossary to have been the first one in Ireland to prophesy the coming of Christ, and who is also said to have risen from the dead and ascended into heaven, where he rode through the sky on his chariot. Now, this conception linking Christ to the sun was not something that was restricted to ancient Christianity. It continued into modern Christianity and persists even to this day. But good examples of it can be found in the hymns, the Christmas hymns or carols of the Carmina Gadelica. To give one example of this, I will read from the hymn titled simply Christmas Carol. Behold, his feet have reached the world. The homage of a king be his. The welcome of a lamb be his. King all victorious, lamb all glorious, earth and ocean illume to him. All hail. Let there be joy. The mountains glowed to him. The plains glowed to him. The voice of the waves with the song of the strand, announcing to us that Christ is born, Son of the King of Kings, from the land of salvation. Shone the sun on the mountains, high to him. All hail, let there be joy. Shone to him the earth and sphere together. God the Lord has opened a door. Son of Mary, Virgin, hasten, thou to help me, thou Christ of hope, thou door of joy, golden sun of hill and mountain, all hail, let there be joy. Now what does it mean when it says, God, the Lord, has opened a door? What door? The door of Mary? The door, perhaps, of the dawn, from which rises the golden sun. Recall that Trefolngid was given the name Trí Ochre, of the three keys. Those keys, almost certainly, are the keys that unlock the sunrise, the high heaven, and the sunset, or the three realms of sky, sea, and underworld, which the sun passes through all three of them. And so here you have potential continuity between a story from the 9th century or 10th century and one recorded in the 19th century. So this massive detour was necessary to show the continuity of concepts, and that it is unquestionable that to many early Christians, and even today, God and Christ were intimately connected with the sun and light, and this was related back to pagan gods. Thus, Christmas was in origin a solar festival related to the winter solstice as the birth of the sun. Christmas appears as a recognized date in the earliest Irish sources. There are some claims that Christmas was not a major celebration, and clearly in the most ancient sources it cannot compare to Samhain or Lunasa. However, it was celebrated. There is mention of a Christmas feast, and note is made of the night before Christmas. It is also frequently listed alongside Cashk, Easter, seemingly marking it to be of comparable importance. However, there can sometimes be confusion, for there are two separate days associated with the name Notlig, that is the old pronunciation of Christmas, but also the word for the Epiphany. The Epiphany is also called Stela, meaning star, but it's also referred to as Notlig or Nolig, so Nolig Stela, or Nolig Beck, meaning the little Christmas. And this is in contrast to Nolig Mór, meaning the big Christmas or the great Christmas. The Epiphany is the date of the revelation of Jesus as being the Christ, and in the Irish tradition, it is connected with the practice of women's Christmas, Nolig Naman, where some elements of gender roles are reversed, and there is a type of perhaps Saturnalia element. It is hard to say how old this specific tradition is, but the origin of Nolig Mór versus Nolig Beck is possibly more than 1,000 years old in itself. Other than a meal at Christmas, there are some customs that likely do have an ancient origin. Bringing in a bough of holly or even ivy inside the house was likely done from an ancient period, with the wood not only being symbolic, but as a protective talisman. Numerous poems outline various qualities of trees and shrubs in this regard, but it isn't that they were seen as symbolic of something, but that they contained a real essence within them that could manifest to the benefit of the family. The day following Christmas is dedicated to Saint Stephen, and in Ireland it is associated with what must be a very ancient tradition. It is also known as La Andreilin, the Day of the Wren. A wren was hunted by boys, killed, and paraded around, sometimes in a holly branch or on a pitchfork. The boys then dressed up, sometimes in masks and costumes, and would petition donations from locals. It was associated with bringing good luck, and the bird is associated with druids and prophecy. Many other Celtic nations have similar traditions around the same time of year. and there is music, dancing, and tricks, but it is very likely that this day was originally connected to a pre-Christian cult. The wren is often said to be the king of birds, but in this case the wren may symbolize the old year, which is replaced by the new year, and it may be thought of as the winter king. In Irish and Welsh, its name is also very similar to the word druid, and surviving sources list it along with the raven as one of the two great birds of omen. In Welsh myth, Lle, the Welsh rendition of Lugh, receives his name upon striking a wren between the tendon and the bone of its leg. That he later takes the form of the eagle may relate in some way to the story of the wren and the eagle, though that may simply be a coincidence. So the striking of the wren may be a symbolic victory over the forces of winter. Both the raven and the wren are viewed as able to forecast death, but the raven is also associated with bringing luck and wealth and abundance, whereas the wren is associated with infidelity. For instance, if the raven calls from atop the storehouse, there will be an increase in the food that is stored in that area from which it is called. There are no such boons ascribed to the wren. The procession with the dead wren was also historically done with blackened faces. A story is told about the bird alerting soldiers of the presence of Irish troops, and thus became known as the Devil's Bird. This was to explain the custom, but it may also relate to some older story. Vikings were often compared to Fomorians, which were likewise called black men, and so there seems to be a convergence here where the Fomorian forces of darkness are symbolically defeated with the death of their messenger or even their king. But this is only a possible interpretation. The slaying of the bird may have originated as a type of bacchanalian play that reflected the myth of Lugh striking the bird, potentially representative of winter and the old year. These St. Stephen Day customs have almost died out, but they seem to indicate traces of pre-Christian cult activity associated with the winter solstice. The Fomorians were believed to be in ascendancy during the winter, those forces that hinder life, that cause poisoned snow to fall upon the ground, and when the sun is said to run a short path. It was likely around winter solstice that Cuchulainn, injured and weak from constant combat, encountered Lugh, who heals him within a grave mound for 3 days and nights. Given the resurrection motif around Cuchulainn, and his role as the first one to prophesy Christ, it may well be that this revival of sorts of Cuchulainn took place around the winter solstice, and is Christ-like in origin, as the battle was said to last from after Samhain till Imbolc. Thus his revitalization is associated with that of the sun. There is also a later tale of Cuchulainn called The Pursuit of Gruid Grianhulis. Gruid Grianhulis is the daughter of the king of Antioch. Her name means something like cheek or brow of sunlight. She is captured by a hideous giant from Morocco, said to be trained by Nechten, who is the son of the earth. Cuchulainn must win back this woman from the realms of Nechten, who lives in the city of the fiery stream, an underworld location. This seems to reflect an original myth of the theft of the sun, or at least of a particular aspect of the sun. Another potentially very old tradition on Christmas was whitewashing and purifying the home generally, and this is likely in association with preparing the house to receive the Lord. Decorations in the house were also generally taken down on the Epiphany, and keeping them up longer may incur bad luck. And of course, on Christmas Eve, candles would be placed in the window as a sign of welcome, not only to friends and neighbors, but to Christ. Some link the tradition to welcoming Mary and Joseph as an innkeeper, but they actually didn't get much welcome from innkeepers being forced into a stable. Perhaps they were trying to make up for this lack of hospitality, but it may well relate to an earlier fire tradition, such as we see practiced by Saint Bridget, who kept an eternal flame, Christ as the Lord of light, being honored and welcomed with the light of the fire. I'd like to give a big thanks to all my Patreon subscribers and my other supporters. Your generosity helps make this possible. Noleg Hanarit, Happy Christmas, and as always, stand tall.